What's up, everybody? This is your Shogun returning to his rightful throne again, and I got a lot of anime backlog to review here: Attack on Titan, World Trigger, Tokyo Revengers, Blade Runner, you name it. And I will eventually get into those, so make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification so you will be knowing when those videos will be dropping out. But today we're going to be focusing on the Shaman King 2021 Reboot. The original Shaman King premiered back in 2001, which I've also seen ages ago. And I still remember fairly well about the details and differentiations between the two versions. And a lot of people obviously have made comparisons between the two. And there seems to be a pretty strong consensus that the original anime was better than this reboot. I'm going to be giving my own thoughts about it obviously in this video. But first I want to kind of break down a bit about the premise. What is Shaman King about before we go into some minor spoilers and my personal review of it. So this takes place in the real world, but it's kind of like a fantasy setting where there are these people known as shamans, which are extraordinary individuals which are basically able to communicate with ghosts, spirits, and gods, which are invisible to like all the normies basically. Only the shamans are able to see them, and they are also able to not just communicate with them, but they also have like ability to infuse with them, like harmonize with these spirits to get like these power-ups. It has its own hard magic systems like Furyoku, which is basically the equivalent of power level in Dragon Ball, and all of these other late 90s types of shonen elements there, like upgrades and fusions, which are pretty cool in my opinion. Now, the story revolves around our main character known as Yo, who is basically entering into this Shaman King tournament, which is held like every 500 years, where all of these shamans basically get around all around the world to basically compete on these preliminary battles, and then there will be this grand tournament, which is kind of like the final arc of the anime, where people will be battling out, and the winner will become the Shaman King, and he will basically possess the Great Spirit, which is like, I guess, the ultimate entity in the world, and etc. So that is kind of like the premise, and obviously down the line there will be other characters joining in the Asakura Yo's journey to adventure all of these continents and things to enter basically on the tournament. And these are pretty much introduced pretty early on in the anime. A couple of the other ones are introduced maybe on the halfway, but there's a lot of different characters, other shamans you will be meeting, and like the character designs on this anime are like really good. They were obviously in the original. I think the original mangaka was obviously very good. Everything looks very unique and different, and it was definitely very popular and different-esque or high quality level of a shonen back to its day. So it's definitely something that has resonated with a lot of OG fans, especially as something of a shonen that people remember. Now let's kind of get into explaining a bit about this difference between the original anime and the reboot, why there was a reboot essentially. So the original anime actually was in the very first arcs, which took place in Japan, were pretty faithful to the manga, but ever since they actually land into America, the anime goes totally on its own story, and it has almost no correlation with the manga whatsoever. So this new one is a lot more canonical and a lot more faithful to the actual manga. Now, however, the original anime was 64 episodes, while this version is 52 episodes. Now, this is just the fundamental problem of the capitalist framework where Japan has the system nowadays. They didn't used to have these, but when they signed these anime TV deals, there's a strict amount of episodes that are being ordered. They don't care about what is the ratio of adaptation. If the manga is 500 chapters, they're still gonna be only giving you 5 to 52 episodes because that's how many weeks there are in the year. And that was the fundamental problem here, that you were forced to basically create a story which was roughly, it needed around 60 episodes to be told, but he only had 52 episodes to do it. So that's a fundamental problem. So the very beginning arc is very fast-paced. There's a very much of a roller coaster speed in this reboot. So the beginning arc, which takes place in Japan, and also the secondary arc, which takes place in China, were pretty rushed and pretty fast. Some people said that this was really, really bad. In my fundamental viewpoint, I don't think that, outside from the characters' interrelationships, this wasn't like very impactful or important part of the story to add more episodes into the Japan and the China arcs. Now, there is this arc that happens from 30th to 34th episode, and I'm probably going to butcher this French pronunciation. Oserer le Voile, I think is the arc's name, which is like a prequel story to Yo and Anna, which are like, you know, a couple, and it kind of like tells the story how these two met basically, and basically were destined to be with each other. And this is like, you know, broke down in the 4-episode arc basically. This is the prequel arc, so to speak. Now, this definitely didn't need 4 episodes. This could have been a story told in 2 episodes, and you could have put out that extra 2 episodes into the end of this anime, which was this, which takes after the tournament, which is, I guess, the reincarnation of the Shaman King arc. I don't want to spoil too much, but here we saw extremely fast pacing, and this definitely could have been an arc that could have, you know, have had a lot more of that juice in it. Could have, like, you know, benefited having from extra episodes, because the fights were really rushed. They were literally like 1 or 2 minutes and like couple of shots or something, and suddenly they were over, and you were expecting like, hey, maybe there could have been a lot more into this, because these are like the last final fights that take place basically in the anime. So the ending arc here was very abysmal in terms of pacing, and it was the worst part of the whole anime, because it was so rushed. You could definitely like feel like, damn, like how they're gonna be finishing in this. I was watching the final 5 episodes and I was like, damn, there's no way that they can wrap all of this in 5 episodes, and they did by extremely rushing, which was very unsatisfactory. But once again, they only had that 52 episodes to tell the story. But if I would have been the director, I would have done all the same decisions, make the beginning shorter, but I would have cut from this prequel arc, because it wasn't really, it's a very significant from a romance point of view, I guess, like understanding the relationship with Anna and Yo, but fundamentally, like, it didn't need to be 4 episodes. I felt like it was very stretched out, and it didn't really need to be that. You could have used the episodes in the end. Now, in terms of the music, they brought back Megumi Haishibara, who was the singer of the opening songs in the original anime. So that was really cool. They haven't really done that before. I don't think there's many like reboots which have done that. And also the opening and the OSTs in general, in the music in general in this anime was actually fairly good. I did a bit of a listen after I finished the anime to kind of remind myself some of the tracks, which were actually very solid. And overall, like, the openings and the endings and the OST were really good in this one. It's not the most, you know, because this is a weekly Shonen Jump anime in the end of the day, and Toei has done a lot of very fantastic OSTs back in the day, but this wasn't necessarily on the level of, like, let's say Bleach or Kuroko's Basketball level of a soundtrack, which it kind of could have been, but it was still like a pretty good soundtrack, I would say. Now, in terms of the animation, I thought it was pretty good, but there was times, especially on these last episodes, where I felt like the fight sequences were like a couple of shots only and very rushed. So the fights felt kind of, well, very fast in a lot of ways. So there was a lot of like stupid filler stuff, and maybe the fights, like especially the final fight. Well, let's talk about that in a second. But I fundamentally felt that the animation was good. A lot of people are very critical about it. Obviously, it looks very fundamentally different from the original anime, and you expect that. You don't want to do a reboot which is one-to-one imitating the same art style as it was in the original. I like both of them, to be honest, but this one also kind of gave it a bit of more colorful approach, I would say, which is kind of the way to go in these modern adaptations. Now, as of the kind of like the ending here, I kind of went and looked into a lot of the ending segments, how it did in the original anime. I think the original anime had a better ending. This one was a bit more everything is forgiven and let's go back, yada yada, kumbaya stuff. I it was kind of, I don't know, it just kind of a bit pretentious, to be honest. Sometimes I don't like this, sympathy for the devil type of storyline in general. At least not for all. But the ending, it wasn't that great. Then there, obviously, the ending, there is a time skip, which is kind of like a reference into the sequel anime, which is going to be happening, which has never been adapted into an anime before. But fundamentally, there's not really that many chapters of Shaman King Flowers and the sequel, because the flowers went from another magazine to another, and they renamed the anime's name. And I remember that the manga's name, and the mangaka also did like some type of a co-production with Stan Lee earlier. I think it was called Ultra or Ultimo or something like that. I remember reading that. But fundamentally, I don't know how much chapter material there is to this sequel anime, and I'm fundamentally pretty sure it's not finished yet. So we might once again get this half-assed original anime ending here. So I'm just kind of hoping that we get a 12 episode arc or 24 episode arc, and by the time the anime has ended its first season, the second season is gonna be able to adapt the manga, which hopefully by then is finished. But fundamentally, I don't think this reboot was as bad as people make it out to be. Some people were saying that the characters were more serious and less funny in this one. I didn't really get that feeling per se. But there were some things in the original anime. Obviously, they had more time to do this filler-esque stuff and build the character relationships. But the original anime had also really retarded stuff, like the main enemy, basically giving a random buff to all the characters, the main characters, at one point of the anime, get to my level, and then he sends to them to this fucking weird ass dream, and when they come out of the dream they are more powered up. Who does that? That doesn't make any sense. So there were a lot of bad things in the original anime which were not very good at all, but there were some redeeming aspects and elements which I liked about the original anime as well. Maybe at some point I have to watch it again and review it on the channel, but I have so much backlog, so I don't know if I have the time for it. But my verdict is that there could have basically be some type of a Redux version made like they did with Berserk, where you would fill in some of the episodes from the early Japan and the China arcs to kind of fill up the gaps there and make it a bit more wholesome. But fundamentally, there's no material to basically fix out the ending arc, which was very, very fast. Fundamentally, I do feel that the original Shaman King anime had a pretty good ending, and usually original anime endings are not very good, but I think it has to be going down as one of the best. But I don't really have much else to add here. I fundamentally think that the anime deserves a bit higher ratings than it currently has. I think the fundamental problem really just comes down to being limited to those 52 episodes when you clearly have a story that is around 58 to 62 episodes long. And there was nothing that they basically could do about it to get more episodes, I guess. But, it is what it is. Hopefully the sequel anime will have no such restrictions and they are able to work more freely on given time frames and episode counts, but we will see, and I definitely will be reviewing that as well on the channel. But thanks for watching. I will be seeing you guys on the next video. Cheers.